Hey, this is Live Long and Podcast. I have a new setup here. I am attempting to record these episodes in a manner that will be more conducive to my schedule sometimes because it's hard to get people organized on the night that Star Trek Discovery airs. So we are starting this format where I can share my thoughts in the case where we can't do more of a long format podcast and sit down and break this episode down. So in this case, we're going to look at Star Trek Discovery Season 2, Episode 11, Perpetual Infinity. It's been about 2 weeks almost since this episode aired. It's been taking me a while to just kind of digest these last two episodes and what I wanted to say about them. And so this is Sunday, April 7th. I'm finally ready to discuss Perpetual Infinity now that it's aired, because the big cliffhanger coming off of the Red Angel was that the Red Angel, who we've been following all season, who we were led to believe in the last episode was Michael Burnham, is not Michael Burnham. It is Gabriel Burnham, Michael Burnham's mother. So let's talk a little bit about this episode. I can't say this was my favorite episode, which I think is part of the reason I've been struggling to do a podcast about it. I've had a chance to watch it a few times now and kind of make some notes and break down what it is. So coming into this episode, they're kind of leaving off with this whole breakdown of the fact that Michael Burnham's mother is the Red Angel. So we get this flashback from Michael Burnham's perspective. Well, I guess it's not really even from Michael Burnham's perspective. It's just a flashback that starts with Gabriel Burnham. She's doing her log entry. She's talking about the time crystals, her research, building of the Red Angel suit. And then she gets called to dinner by the 10-year-old Michael Burnham and her husband, whose name escapes me at this moment. We don't get to know very much about him in this flashback. They seem to have a good family dynamic. That's kind of what's established here. And then, it kind of basically leads right into the events of the attack on Daktari Alpha, the base where they were at when this Klingon attack happened 20 years prior to the events of Star Trek Discovery. And so she sees the bird of prey coming in on her telescope. Michael Burnham does from that perspective. And she wakes up in sickbay. So it's kind of like she's waking up from this memory, even though it kind of started with the memories of Gabriel Burnham and her log entries, which she wasn't privy to that part of it. So that's why I was kind of confused if it was a flashback from Michael Burnham's perspective or from Gabriel Burnham's perspective. It kind of doesn't seem to be either one in particular. It seems to be a bit of a mesh of the two. So she wakes up in sick bay. She goes, "Whoa, I thought I was hallucinating. I thought I saw my mother." And Dr. Culber explains, "Oh, it was your mother. The thing is, the bioneural signature, I know I said it was you from the future, but I was wrong. Mothers and daughters have very similar characteristics. And I can't, and so that's why I confused you for her when I was identifying the bioneural signature in the last episode." To me, this was incredibly weak. I didn't really understand how a mother and daughter would have the same bioneural signature, regardless of whether or not they have the same mitochondrial DNA. That's not what my understanding of a bioneural signature would be. That would have to do with your brain waves and your neural net and things like that. It doesn't quite, the science fiction of that doesn't quite make sense to me at all. But I think that they wanted there to be this great reveal at the end of the last episode, and that's why we were led to believe the whole episode was a future Michael Burnham was the Red Angel, only to discover it's Gabriel Burnham. So she's very taken aback. Okay, my mother's alive. What does this mean? I thought this was, well played. I thought that she was strong in this scene. And then, she wants to see her mother, obviously. They say, well, she's unconscious. We can't talk to her right now. Anyway, we have her in this field, and she can't get out of the, don't worry about that. She'll be safe and sound. Spock shows up. He says, we've downloaded her mission logs from the suit. Okay, that's great. There's 841 mission logs. And he goes, I think you should start, Michael Burnham, you should start analyzing this. So she agrees, and we're kind of left off there. Over to the Section 31 ship, which we've come to know is NCIA, CIA 93, which is apparently the name of their ship. So Control hologram is talking to Leland, who we saw sort of subdued him at the end of the last episode, and in talking about how Control can impersonate different people through holograms. Leland points out that they were able to figure this out when Control was impersonating Dr. Patar, and so they say, well, that doesn't really matter. There's 7,000 active starships in Starfleet. There's a chain of command. All these orders kind of flow down the chain of command. Therefore, it's not going to be that hard for me to take over. Basically, Control tells Leland here. Actually, interesting thing to say, there's 7,000 ships in Starfleet. I don't think it's ever been quite quantified in that sense, or certainly not in this particular time period of Starfleet. And I wonder what that means. Does that include smaller little runabout type ships? Because I think they've estimated, I've heard estimates of like 10,000 ships in the 24th century. Anyway, I'm getting a little granular here. But just in terms of this whole conversation between Leland and Control, Control has him subdued. And basically it's this whole scene where Control takes over his body through the use of nanites. I thought this was fine. I thought that it was, it's kind of been established, with Borg technology that a human body could be taken over by machinery like this. So I felt it was borrowing a lot of those concepts from the Borg, but overall I think it's fine. If Control can take over a living, breathing human, so be it. So we get the credits, and then from there we go back to, Burnham's watching all these logs from her mother, Gabriel Burnham, starting to kind of piece together what happened to her, seeing that during that Klingon attack, they put Michael in the closet basically, and then she says, okay, I'm going to go in the suit, and I'm going to go back an hour in time, and that's how we're going to kind of avert this crisis. We're going to get out of here sooner than we should, before this attack even happened. That was the initial plan here. And so Burnham's mother ends up 950 years in the future, and then I guess she's anchored to 950 years in the future after this point. She can only return to this time period after this initial botch of the Red Angel suit happens. Which, okay, that's interesting. So I don't know, like she's anchored to the future. There's just a series of logs. She says, okay, well, I found out there's no life left in the galaxy. I found a series of antimatter explosions. Every habitable planet in the galaxy, at least the ones she can travel to, have been destroyed. There's no life left. So this would be circa, it's the 23rd century. So I guess this would be the 32nd century that she's in. I don't know. 950 is kind of an odd number to pick, but that's the one they go with here. And so, she says, "Oh, Control did this." I don't even know how. This is the part that didn't really make sense to me. Like, how did she know what Control was? How did she know? Because I don't think that Control is established while she's building the Red Angel suit. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is where I start getting really confused. Like, all this explanation is kind of yada quite a bit. You don't have really much time to absorb it. I often find myself having to go back and rewatch a lot of this and just kind of determine, what's exactly happening. So, but she says, okay, life's been wiped out 1,000 years later. Control was responsible, and so we get kind of a break in the logs. We go out to the bridge. Um, they say, okay, we're discovering that there's some gravimetric issues on the planet. They kind of piece together that the wormhole, the power they're using to hold Michael Burnham's mother here in the 23rd century, that the wormhole is kind of pulling back, and there's an opposite and equal reaction, which makes sense, I suppose. So that they can't kind of indefinitely hold her, that eventually they just don't have enough power to keep her there. Over to the Section 130 ship, now we have Control Leland here. And so he starts, kind of casting doubt on who Gabriel Burnham is, and that's not really her. That kind of, it's kind of obvious to us because we know that he's under Control's influence, or that this is Control effectively using Leland as an avatar, that Control would start interfering with this plan, I guess. Yeah, sure. Okay. And then so Michael's watching more of these logs. She talks about, okay, I moved these humans to Terra Elysium, and I did this and I did that, and again, I would really like to. I could have spent a whole episode just with Michael Burnham's mother after she goes to this time period, figure how she comes to know what she knows. We find out a little bit later in the episode that she's been observing the past, so she's able to access the past. She's able to see kind of when Michael Burnham went to her Vulcan graduation. She talks about the dress she wore when she first joined the crew of the Shenzhou. And so my main question for you is this: if if Gabriel Burnham can do all this and can see the past in such clarity and kind of watch the past in almost a recording fashion, kind of know everything that's happened, why doesn't she do something with her time travel technology to prevent the creation of Control in the first place? This is the big hole for me. Control is an AI that could have been avoided, could have been averted somehow. That the creation of that technology could have been, because basically it's Skynet. So, and in Terminator, the Terminator franchise, that is exactly what they do in Terminator 2. They're like, if we take out Miles Dyson, there won't be a Skynet. If we destroy this computer chip from the first Terminator, they can't use this to develop the AI. So therefore, Judgment Day never happens. So there's never any kind of sense of that. Like there's complete, there's no problem interfering with the timeline on multiple occasions to achieve this goal to prevent the wipeout of all sentient life in the galaxy. But there's no talk about how to prevent this from even occurring in the first place, which is very odd to me. Yeah, so when I was watching this, like, how does she know all these things? We find out later she's able to see the past. So they do wrap that part up. And then, okay, now in the present time, in the 23rd century, Michael Burnham's mother wakes up. She doesn't want to talk to Michael, though. She only wants to talk to Pike. And there's a whole kind of argument about this. Why shouldn't I get to talk to her? I haven't seen her in so many years. This is ridiculous. And eventually, Spock and Pike say, well, we have to follow her lead here. She's the best thing we got. We don't want to, whatever she wants, we have to kind of go with it. Sure. Okay. So Pike goes down, and he says, we're talking. She's very, very indignant with him that just a whole lot of attitude towards Captain Pike. And she's just angry. I guess she's been isolated for an unknown number of years. But the hostility between her and Pike, and also later on with her and Burnham, she's just kind of so self-righteous in her cause that it kind of throws me off. She talks about, well, hey, I could tell you about your future, but you wouldn't like it very much. Kind of giving an allusion to the fact that, Pike will, it doesn't, it ultimately ends well with him with the Telosians, as we know, but that, he's going to suffer quite a bit before, that happens. And he talks about the signals, which she doesn't even know about. So this is another inconsistency that Gabriel Burnham is this all-knowing person from the future that has kind of seen all the timeline play out in multiple fashions. But these 7 red signals, which Spock has been seeing since he was a kid, and we established later that she's been talking to Spock since he was a kid as well, to help prevent Burnham from being killed by that creature on Vulcan many years ago, among other things. That the signals are unknown to her. She's that part she doesn't know, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And she says, "Well, you have to destroy the sphere data. You destroy it. You have this. I put the sphere in the path of discovery so that you would get the sphere data, and then you could keep it away from Control getting it, which is what Control will use to become self-aware. Even though Control already seems pretty self-aware." But that will put Control sort of on this next level in order to do the whole Judgment Day thing and destroy the entire all of sentient life in the galaxy through a series of antimatter explosions. Even those in the other parts of, I don't know. And so anyway, so Saru objects to this. You can't burn the sphere data. They say, well, if the sphere data is going to, destroy all of life, then we have to. Kind of a silly, yeah, of course we do. And so Spock then is watching. Oh yeah, so they figure out they can't delete the data. The data is too smart to be deleted. But you can't transfer it, but you can't delete it. So Spock is watching some of Gabriel's logs. She talks about how she's been talking to him since he was a child. They avoided this death of Michael Burnham on Vulcan. Okay. And the fact that he's half human is what allows this to be possible, I suppose, is what's postulated here. And so Michael, okay, I don't know. They have a whole conversation about it, and he says, I've been running from my human side my whole life. And she says, well, it's because of your human side that you were able to do these other things, which I think is compelling. I think that interesting, but also inconsistent with what we know of future Spock. So this is what allows for, the next scene is Gabriel Burnham and Michael Burnham. They finally come face to face on the planet. Even though she still is Gabriel Burnham's still angry and doesn't want to talk to Michael Burnham, she does. However, the one thing that didn't make sense to me here is when Michael Burnham materializes from the transport beam, she appears not to recognize her. Gabriel Burnham appears not to recognize Michael Burnham. That doesn't really make a lot of sense either, because she says that I've been watching you. I watched you in that dress when you graduated from the Vulcan Science Academy. But she doesn't know her face, or at least she pretends perhaps not to know her. That part, I wasn't sure if that was some sort of a ruse, but eventually they kind of, oh, it's you, and I don't want to talk, and I watched you die so many times. It was great acting in the scene. I thought both of these actresses were really good, despite the fact that the plot of this whole season, for me, is unraveling quite a bit, and the motivations and the logic of it all. In a show that is about Vulcans and logic, there's not a lot of logic here. So they have this whole thing, and she's like, "Let me help you. We can save you." And sure, they don't really seem to come to much of a resolution. Gabriel Burnham, much like Michael Burnham, seems to have this stubborn streak where it's all up to her. They tend to have this tendency to put all the weight of the world on their shoulders and think that only them alone can save the day. Nobody else can. They have this martyr syndrome. So they backed on Discovery. So Stamets is like, we can't keep her here forever. We don't have enough power. Ash Tyler generously offers power from the Section 31 ship, but he says that's not going to be enough to do it. And Spock says, we've been going about this all wrong. Instead of trying to destroy the sphere or the sphere data, let's let's go with it. Like the water is the softest substance in the world, like the great philosopher whoever said, and it can move mountains. So therefore, instead of fighting time, we need to go with it. And so we need to merge the data with the river of time. I say, oh, okay, what's the river of time exactly? And they say, well, we're just going to send it to the future. Okay. So this, it can do. Control can't get it if we throw it into the distant, the distant future. They'll never get it. The suit has like unlimited data storage. We're told, and it can do unlimited quantum calculations. So it will be in perpetual infinity. Here's our plan. We'll throw all the data into the suit. We'll send the suit to the future. No problem. Crisis averted. Okay. Just for the record, I had to watch this scene. I don't know, probably 4 times. Even just on this latest rewatch, I've watched the episode a few times now. And this scene, it's so fast. There's so much like what they would call Star Trek technobabble. But normally I can follow it a lot better than this. This was tough because they're always kind of toggling between these more like high-level sci-fi concepts and more layman's terms. And when they try to like bring it down to something that they think the casual audience will understand, it doesn't sync up with the kind of grander idea that they just proposed. Like this whole like we'll merge it with the river of time. And then they say, well, we're just sending it to the future. And I'm like, well, okay, but those aren't quite the same things. And so even though this is the scene where they kind of figure out what they're going to do, I still don't really understand what's going on, and I still don't. And I think that's one of the big problems of this show right now is that they just don't know how to explain where they're taking this, and they yada 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 very quickly over things, which I think is a big mistake because I think that if you had some really good sci-fi concepts, you could, and you have the time, you have a long enough season to explain these things well. And I know that they're always toggling between like trying to be entertaining and trying to be, I don't know, like forward thinking with their sci-fi approach, and these don't mesh up, unfortunately for me. Anyway, so that's the plan. We're gonna we're gonna dump the data, the sphere data, into the suit, send it to the future. That's the plan they come to after this conversation. We go over to Leland Control Leland. Of course, he's against this plan. He finds out about the plan right away. It's unclear how he knows about it, but he's against it. So he's manipulating Georgiou. Like, it mustn't bother you that Gabriel Burnham's here, right? Like, that's a threat to your relationship with Michael, and don't you want to help me do something about it? And Georgiou's figuring this out that he's not quite right. He's not quite who he normally would be, and he's not acting like himself. She knows something's up, but she doesn't know what. And so I don't think she's really fooled by Control's attempts to manipulate her. But it's kind of interesting to watch this scene just to kind of understand where Control's coming from, especially that after we see what Control can do a little bit later on in the episode. So we got this Gabriel and Georgiou conversation. She knows who Georgiou is. She knows she's from the mirror universe. Again, Gabriel Burnham sort of knows everything about the future, except for certain things like what Michael Burnham looks like. Even though at that time, Stamets and Michael show up, and they said, "Oh, we lost our feed," because Georgiou destroys the camera on the feed. And so they say, okay, well, we're here to start kind of initiating this plan. Again, I don't understand why Section 31 is even there. Like, I don't understand why Starfleet, they seem to be partners in this, but they don't seem to have the same goals, and Starfleet just kind of seems to put up with them, which doesn't seem like something Starfleet should be doing. I guess they're all in this together, but then at the same time, wouldn't you... Considering the level of the threat, shouldn't there be like a fleet of ships involved in this whole mission, not just one? Something to think about. So this So I guess Ash Tyler, he walks in on Control / Leland sort of doing an upgrade, figures out that he's not on the sees the nanites and everything coming out, and realizes that that it's not him. So they get into immediately they get into a fight. Oh, hello. Um, and so Control and Ash Tyler, they have a big fight. Uh, Leland stabs him with something, a knife, I guess, and then so then Leland beams away, and Ash Tyler calls Discovery. He goes, he just has enough time to. Oh, hold on. I was just distracted by a comment there. Sorry. And then Leland shows up on the surface, and they have this sort of big fight. I guess they figure out pretty quickly that Leland is not who he is, partly because Ash Tyler called, and he starts killing red shirts left and right, and so they have this. I don't know. There's just a lot of action going on here, which is fine, but it just what did it, what did I actually think about it? I guess they have to stop the Terminator. Is what is going on here. Realize that even though the data hasn't fully transferred over, that they need to do something to get the suit out of here, to get, well, not so much Gabriel Burnham out of here, but they have to do something. So they destroy the emitters. Gabriel Burnham and the suit get sucked back into the wormhole. And then they beam up the landing party. They try to fire torpedoes at the surface, which I thought this was smart. They try to do it very quickly, but it's to no avail. That the Leland Control has beamed back up to the Section 31 ship and has gotten away. And so, but guess what? Ash Tyler, he got out on an escape pod first. So my main question is, there's a bunch of crew on board that Section 31 ship, and are they involved with this? Are they just following Leland's orders because they believe it to be him? Has Control killed those people? I kind of want to see where that goes. I wasn't, none of that was shown. And we end the episode with Spock and Burnham having a conversation. They say, we're going to defeat Control with a combination of logic and instinct. That's going to be the winning formula. And they sit down to have their chess match. I think being symbolic of the fact that I guess they're in this chess match with Control for the ultimate goal of what's going to happen. Anyway, so that was the episode Perpetual Infinity. Overall, like I said, I think that there was a lot rushed in this episode. I think that the performance of Michael Burnham's mother, Gabriel Burnham, I think it's interesting at times. I think that the scene that she had with Michael, I thought was a high note. I thought that they both acted very well in that scene, and otherwise, I think it was kind of a mess, though. I don't really understand where this show is going. So anyway, that's my main thoughts on it. It's kind of a struggle right now. And I find that this is what the show does in general. Like, there's kind of these ups and downs, and at times there's some good things. There's some real good things in there, but generally speaking, it's bad. And that's really about it. It's a lot different when you're having a conversation with yourself versus playing off somebody else. So this is a new thing for me. Anyway, let me know what you think about this format. I'm going to continue to share my thoughts on my Live Long and Podcast, about Star Trek Discovery here on Live Long and Podcast. In this manner, moving forward, I think I might get, maybe a light or something to just make this a little easier to see. I know I have a lot of light in the background here from the daytime windows. So let me know if you have any suggestions. We're happy to hear them, and keep commenting and subscribing. Anyway, my next review will be on the next episode, which is in the Valley of Shadows, which I've already seen, but I'm going to discuss that episode on the next broadcast, which I liked a lot better than this one. So we'll get into that on the next feed. Anyway, thank you, and live long in podcast.